Joining us now, Blaine Fowler, dual threat analyst for college football and college basketball. Blaine, welcome back to the show. We've been discussing the Go Fast, Go Hard offense and how much of an improvement it really was from 2012 to 2013 when you do an offensive overhaul like that. And the numbers are kind of striking because it didn't look like it was that much. What do you feel like has to change for BYU to take that huge leap in 2014?
Well, you guys, we've talked about before the fact that as they got toward the end of 2013, they realized that they want to go fast and they want to go hard, but that they can't do that at the expense of execution. And I understand, when Robert was bringing the system in, there had to be a mentality change in terms of the way these guys conditioned themselves and prepared mentally to be able to push and push and push. Just like if you take a team that's been a walk-it-up-the-court basketball team, then all of a sudden try to have them fast break, the first thing you have to do is you have to get their mindset to just run up and down the floor at full speed, and then you start to make sure that you have the right spacing and all those kinds of things. That was Robert's mentality, and at the end of last season, we started to see them not worry so much about getting plays off in 14 seconds, but pushing it in terms of pace and executing better, and the throw game improved dramatically. I think it's a combination of them making the execution better and a quarterback that was starting to settle in and understand what everybody was supposed to do and understand the offense and understand pacing too as a quarterback. Like, when can we push it and when is it prudent to get a play off very quickly, and when do we need to take that extra half a second to let my lineman make a call? So we saw all of that come into play as the season went on last season, and I just think now this season, with that same quarterback returning, with more offensive linemen healthy and coming back, with a really talented group of wide receivers, I think you're going to see the biggest jump this season in how this offense is going to gel and play.
Blaine Fowler's on BYU Sports Nation, and it should. When you have you just label it. When you have the same coaching staff, Taysom Hill for his second year as quarterback and under the same system, all the running backs back, a bunch of explosive receivers, you better take a leap. Now, the big surprise to me out of all the stats we kind of broke down is that BYU only ran 8.3 more plays per game than 2012. Did you think that number was higher?
I think that the beginning of the season, remember, we were watching games and covering games where they were running 80-plus plays, and they weren't that good offensively. So I think that's all part of that settling in process as the season progressed, where they became self-aware of what they could do, and that play count came down. And I'm perfectly fine if it's only 8 or 10 more plays a game. I think that that's enough plays. Think about it. That's another drive or two per game. That puts more pressure on the defense. I do think, however, that now that they're executing better and now that they have a quarterback who should be really, really comfortable as long as they keep him healthy, I think we will see that play count creep back up again, and not dramatically, but 3, 4, 5 more plays a game this year, because the quarterback in Taysom Hill is going to understand when he can appropriately push it, and he'll think faster, and he'll be able to process things faster. And so he's just going to be overall better at running this offense.
Blaine Fowler on BYU Sports Nation. What do you feel was the number one reason why BYU in clutch scenarios, in third down situations and in the red zone, could not deliver on a regular basis in the go fast, go hard offense? They moved the ball effectively between the 20s. What was it that was causing them to not have success on third downs and especially in the red zone?
Spencer, I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that's the biggest issue that they need to address, that they needed to address in spring ball, that they need to address in this offseason, and that they have to improve upon in fall. If they don't get better in that area, they're not going to reach the potential we feel that everybody feels they have with the personnel they have this fall. It was a big issue. I think it's twofold. I think the first thing is, on the offensive line, they weren't knocking people off the ball. And when you have a third and short, you have to be a threat to run the football, where if just man-to-man up front, you're going to knock people off the ball, and if they don't put 8 in the box, then you're going to run it and get a first down. BYU didn't scare anybody in their short yardage running game last year, so teams would play them straight up in short yardage situations, and they weren't able to knock people off the ball. And in regular straight-up situations, they had enough people in the secondary and the backers and coverage that there weren't very many throwing holes or open areas to throw the football in. And that's what happens when you get down. When you get down inside the 20 in scoring territory, defensive backs can sit on everything. They've got another defender, which is the back end of the end zone. They know that nobody can go deep on them, so they can sit on things, and those throwing lanes become really, really small. So here's where the second point comes into play. The quarterback has to be really comfortable, really decisive, and he's got to throw the ball on time. And we saw Taysom Hill getting better at that as the season progressed, but he's going to make a quantum leap this year. Quarterbacks that go from a sophomore to a junior year always make a huge step in this area. So the combination of having a healthy, deeper offensive line that we hope will be more physical. You know, he talked to Garrett Tujague, and he thinks they're going to be more physical this year, that can knock people off the ball, and a quarterback that will make quicker reads and get the ball up on time in those small throwing lanes. That will make a big, big difference in how they perform in short yardage and down inside the 20. That's the area I think they will improve most in. I know they focused on it, and if they don't, I'll be really disappointed.
Phil Steele was on the show recently and told us that he ranked BYU's offensive line going into 2014 as the 15th best in America, Blaine. We thought that was really high, but he said that he thinks they'll be vastly improved because of the number of career starts. 10 returning guys that started a game. You add Tuni Kanuch, who was injured. Ului Lapuaho, who Bronco Mendenhall was really high on. Is that where BYU improves the most in any position group, offensive line?
Yeah, I absolutely think they do. I think that Kanuch brings them. You know what we were looking for all of last year, and we talked about it on the show a lot of times. We were looking for an offensive lineman that would just be that nasty tone setter.
Where's Dustin Reichert?
Yeah, it's exactly. You know, like the guy that his own team on defense calls an idiot. That's the guy you want. If you don't have a guy on the offensive line that in practice the defense goes, I hate that guy's an idiot. But then in the next sentence they go, yeah, but I'm really glad he's on our team. That's the guy you want. And I don't think BYU had that guy last year on the offensive line. I think that Tuni Kanuch can be that guy. And I think guys with more experience, you know, I know DeAndre Wesley is a guy that seems like he's fairly mild-mannered, but with another year of experience, I think these guys will get a little nastier. And I think Kanuch can be a guy, if he can stay healthy, that can set the tone. Do you remember when Famika Anai came in and played for that one game?
Against Hawaii. The greatest single game in BYU offensive line history. He had two guys carted off. And then the next week he was declared injured, and he was done for the rest of his life.
Walk-off.
Well,
a walk-off.
That was one of the best performances overall as an offensive line we saw out of BYU for the season. And
Taysom Hill started that game.
Yes, he set the tone for the entire offensive line. His tone was, not only am I going to knock people crazy here on the offensive line, when I pull and I get downfield, I'm going to crush people down there. I want helmets to fall off. And the whole line lifted their level of play. And so one guy can have a huge impact. And if you go back over the years, it's a great
BYU
offensive line.
Sports Nation breaking news.
They've had one of those guys every single time.
Blaine, we've got some breaking news right now just coming in, and we're going to want to get your reaction from this. It has been confirmed to BYU Sports Nation. The NCAA is announcing that BYU Athletic Director Tom Holmoe will be appointed as a member of the NCAA Division I Basketball Selection Committee. Wow. He will replace West Coast Conference Commissioner Jamie Zaninovich in that role. Holy cow. Tom Holmoe's life just got a little bit busier. Blaine, what does this do for the BYU Athletic Department?
I think it's great in terms of exposure, because now Tom's going to be in meetings, planning meetings, and the actual selection committee meetings with some of the powers that be in college basketball. It's a great exposure thing for BYU. And while he can't be in the room when they're talking about his team, you know that there's some influence there just by virtue of their association with him. Like, everybody's going to give that's in that room, if they're looking at Tom and he's being objective and he's an integral part of that committee, when it comes time to consider seeding and all that for BYU, even though he's not allowed to have input on his own team, he absolutely will have influence just by virtue of his association, his relationship with those folks. So I think it's a huge thing, and it sends a big statement that the NCAA considers BYU an integral part of NCAA college basketball. I think that's great.
Scott Barnes, the athletic director at Utah State, is also on that committee. It's a 10-man committee. And if you're just joining us, Tom Holmoe, BYU athletic director, will be a part of the 10-man NCAA Division I men's basketball committee. Got a quote from him here. It says, "I'm honored to be selected to represent the West Coast Conference and to serve on the NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Committee. I appreciate those who have served before me and will do all I can to keep the tournament the wonderful event it has become." The question for me now becomes time spent for Tom Holmoe. As we got to know Jamie Zaninovich, that guy was a busy, busy man watching a lot of basketball. How does that affect him as the athletic director and being able to be on the selection committee, you think?
Well, the good news is Tom's got good, he's got a good staff around him, and you don't anticipate any major coaching changes that he has to be involved in this coming year, and so he can delegate to very, very capable people the smaller things that need to be done, and just make sure he stays abreast of the major things. So, hey, he's done a great job. As an athletic director, you're like a CEO of a corporation. His corporation is BYU Athletics. And great CEOs, they always get asked to be on boards of directors of other corporations. And what it does is it's worth the time invested in the other venture, because then a CEO comes back to his company and he's exposed to different practices, different ideas that he can bring back. So the benefit for BYU is not only exposure, but his interaction with those folks. He'll bring back ideas and things from the people he's interacting with that will benefit BYU. And so for BYU, they're glad to have him do that, just like a major corporation is glad to have their CEO serve on a board of directors of another major company.
If you're just joining BYU Sports Nation, the NCAA announcing that BYU Athletic Director Tom Holmoe will be appointed as a member of the 10-person NCAA Division I Basketball Selection Committee. He will replace former West Coast, I should say current, but soon-to-be former West Coast Conference Commissioner Jamie Zaninovich in that role. We're talking to Blaine Fowler, BYU TV dual sport analyst. Tom is a busy guy, and he takes a lot of flack from people about the state of the program. Let's go back to BYU football now as we transition from basketball back to the gridiron. He's facing an interesting situation in Independence now that the ACC and the SEC have come out and said, hey, BYU, we're not going to count you as a P5 team.
Not officially, but it looks that way.
It looks that way anyway. What do you feel like BYU has to do to make it so that those conferences cannot ignore them anymore as a legitimate Power 5 opponent?
Well, there's two things. Either they need to get into a Power 5 conference, which I still don't think is out of the question. So, and I've always believed, and we've talked about this many times, that the Big 12 is a good fit for BYU. So I think that Tom, you talk about what's on his plate, he and his staff, along with the president, with Kevin Worthen, they're going to continue to actively investigate opportunities. And the Big 12 just seems like a natural, because they need to have more teams to fill out their roster of teams to be able to stage a championship and to really continue to be a Big 5 conference. So that's one option. The other is you got to schedule like you did last year and beat those teams. So you can stay independent, but if you're going to be independent, then you have to win a higher percentage of the big games, and you need to be ranked. Because they're going to say BYU's a power team if they're in the top 15 every year. But they're not going to be in the top 15 if they schedule the way they've scheduled last year, and they only win the games they're supposed to win, and they don't really get any of the upsets against the big teams. And so, that starts this year. They've got some opportunities. I think the schedule is conducive for them to win 10, 11, maybe even 12 games. I believe that Texas on the road and Central Florida on the road are big, big tasks. But, say you get one of those two, and those two teams have the capability to be ranked this year, and then you run the table the rest, and now you're ranked in the top 15. That gets the attention of people. So if you can't find a conference, then you have to win at a high level, and you've got to win games against teams from those 5 power conferences and not win against the Kansases and the Iowa States of the world.
Or the Virginias and Cals.
Yeah.
Right. You've got to beat Texas. You got to beat those types of schools. You got to go beat a UCLA. You got to beat teams in the upper half of those Power 5 leagues, and you've got to schedule those. So if you're going to stay independent, you've got to schedule them, and you've got to win them.
Blaine, I know this is outside the box, but does this recent appointing or soon-to-be appointing of Tom Holmoe to the NCAA Division I Basketball Selection Committee, will that have any effect on him being established as a more credible figure and perhaps making BYU's athletic department, notably the football program, more attractive? Does that have any tie?
Oh, I think it has a tie, absolutely. it's a little bit of a reach, but it's not that big of a reach if you think about it, because he is going to be on that committee with athletic directors, and commissioners from major conferences. That as they get exposed to him, and you guys have been around Tom Holmoe. If you're around Tom Holmoe for any period of time, you recognize what an unbelievably talented guy he is. And he'll be fast friends with those folks very quickly. He'll build relationships, and those relationships are what lead to arrangements and invitations to conferences and not being excluded from scheduling. Now, remember, even if the SEC says that you have to play at least one team from a Big Five conference, that doesn't mean they can't schedule BYU. It just means there's one less opportunity. It doesn't mean that they can't schedule them. And so, anyhow, you asked Spencer, and I think, there is a tie. I think that exposure and the people that he rubs elbows with on a regular basis, that can only help BYU open doors to have opportunities.
Blaine Fowler bringing it today, man. We appreciate the time. Good to have you back on the program. And thanks for the insight into BYU football, and now Tom Holmoe being selected as a member of the NCAA Selection Committee. So, Blaine, great to have you with us, man.
I miss you guys. We're not that far from just getting it going full time again every week.
86 days.
Go work on the tan before the fall, Blaine.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to chill out. I'm going to go to Europe for a couple of weeks while you guys work, and then I'll be back refreshed and ready to go.
That sounds good. Thanks, Blaine.